Hello, I'm Tommy Moore from the Bartitzer Lab, and in this video I just want to talk to you about a new exciting thing that I got through the post today, and it is a modern interpretation of what is known as a FairCane. So this FairCane was made by bladesmith Allen Karlsson, a German bladesmith, predominantly known for his work on the German Messer. It's kind of short machete-style medieval swords. But he's made this very, very beautiful FairCane. And it's based off the designs of William Fairbairn. It's made a fair bit longer, but in essence it carries many of the features. So for example, it has a weighted steel head, but it's still relatively subtle, but it takes an absolute hit. It's got a steel core going through the middle, which is flexible. So the cane has flexibility. It is light. It is wrapped in leather, as you can see here, and it comes to a kind of semi-point at the bottom, again with steel. So end to end, it's about here. It's got this nice leather wrap at the top, which I like. I'm 6'4". Having this here, it kind of comes up to my hip, so it's a nice, reasonable size. The actual FairCanes themselves were often smaller, more like a swagger stick, so something that a officer may carry, so probably lopping off about a third of this, but still culminating in the spike and having this anatomy. And those of you familiar with the Fairbairn Sykes fighting knife might have noticed that the design up top here, so this handly element, this is actually kind of a replicate of the fighting knife's handle in many of the models. So again, there are elements of the knife which is manifest in the FairCane, and I really like this. Now, William Fairbairn, having spent much of his life as a police officer, and again looking at riot squads, would have been very, very familiar with the use of things like this. So again, this is a truncheon or club, nice and ergonomic, solid grip, hefty weight, and if you're going to break up a crowd, you might have something like this. You might have something like this if you're doing clandestine work, or if you were predominantly firearms orientated but you needed a backup melee style weapon. So you've got small truncheons like this, larger truncheons like this, or extremely large truncheons, or the use of the Indian lathi stick, which again is probably about Joe size, I'd say. So if you're familiar with Japanese weapon, about the size of a Joe would be an Indian lathi stick. And again, many of the Sikh constables and Sikh sergeants would have used these, as would many of the other officers. So the use of bludgeoning weapons would have been very, very familiar to Fairbairn. And you see them manifest in his works, albeit in different ways. So for example, in his Defendu work, with a more policing orientated mindset, you get things which have a lot more restraints in them. So as you can see here, kind of a head and arm hold with the stick. You've got, again, kind of chest holds with the stick. You do have some degree of striking in here, and you do have neck throws, which potentially are lethal force if they're coming back on the track here. But in the main, these are restrain or escape tools in Defendu. Soon as you move through a couple of years and you get into the war, soon as it comes to Nazis, jamming a stick in their throat and watching them die on their own blood, spit and vomit, that's fair game. So as you start to move into Gutterfighting, you start to move into World War II, you get much stealthier uses of the cane, jamming up into the throat. You get more serious use of the stick as a striking tool and less of a grappling tool or grappling aid. I much prefer the work that's in this because it's concise, it's memorable, it's percussive, and it matches how I like to operate. But by the same token, if you are looking for restraints, or if you had a duty to restrain, if you were a military police officer, if you were a police officer, paramilitary, or so on, then potentially some of the stick restraint work in the earlier Defendu stuff would have been more up your alley. But we're just going to go through some of the features of the FairCane, and hopefully you find that interesting. So, again, as I mentioned, this is longer than the typical FairCane, but I really like it. It suits me. So let's look at some of the first advice from Fairbairn in Defendu. I think it's very cool. And I'll read it ad verbatim to you. The art of the walking stick in attack or defence is not generally well known, yet it is possible for anybody to master a very powerful man if the following instructions be carried out. To bring your assailant to the ground, hit him on the shins just below the kneecap, or jab him in the stomach with the point. So let's rest there. So a couple of ways that you may wish to do this, a la Fairbairn. Now, Again, I'm using a slightly different cane here, so I'm modifying the techniques to suit the cane. And it is a reality of things that the type of cane will essentially trigger what type of techniques you use. My Bartitsu canes, my historic canes, like so, this one made by Nephilim canes, using this in a Vinyu style format is going to feel very, very different to using this FairCane, which will in turn feel very different from using this club. So just to point out that every single cane has its own, where they share similarities, they also have rather marked differences too. So, firstly, if we're striking the shins with the cane, I think it's very important that any stroke that goes low down must require you to make space. If I strike at his shins while I'm in arm's length or just beyond arm's length, I might crack him in the shin, but if he cracks me on the jaw and knocks me out and I bang my head on the floor, I've lost. I might have cracked his shin bone, but he's cracked my jaw and taken my consciousness from me. He's won. He can do terrible things to me. So if you are going to go for the shin or the kneecap or something of that ilk, I'd advise A, using a sliding leverage style grip, much like you would with an axe, like so. But in this instance, we're stepping back, and striking into the leg. I'm striking a bit high on the bob because A, bob doesn't have legs, and I like this cane, and B, you won't be able to see it anyway. So stepping back, striking at that leg area. Also, I don't have the room sideways, but if you've got the space and the attack comes from the side, again, you can pivot and turn and strike from here. But stepping back, so you don't catch anything up top. You might have a blade, you might be punching, you might be grabbing, attack to the leg with the cane. Not my favoured, but again, something Fairbairn references. When he mentions jabbing the body, now for me, the ideal weapon with the FairCane is using this top hard metal bulbous bit. So much like I would do with the chin jab, the World War II chin jab, in this instance, I take a flanking step to the left as I drive this forward. You'll notice for me, I'm using thumb in almost a sabre-ish fashion, and that's where this fighting knife style grip format is actually very useful. Although it's designed this way around, it can also work very well this way around. So again, we take a flanking step as we drive this into the solar plexus. Okay, now what I might do as I do that is fire an edge of hand blow with the free hand, or just strike broadly to the face. I want to keep his attention up high as this is driven into his solar plexus. I've stepped off to the left to smother his right hand and the weapons he might access on his right hand side, and allowing me to flank and escape if I wanted to, or take the back for any degree of lock, strangle, strike, or other element. Flanking with this is very important. If I strike him and stay centralised, if it's a decent strike, I'll drop him. But if it's just a tough motherfucker who's wearing a big coat, bang, and I don't drop him, I'm suddenly within reach of every single punch, stab, grab he may wish to do. And he'll really go for it because I'm the armed party in this instance. So flanking is important to get you out the murder box, to open up other weapons, and to stop those attacks coming from here. Drive that straight in, bang! Then you're flanking off. Then you can do something else if you're so inclined, bang, whatever you wanted to do. But striking to the body for this, I quite like this flanking step here, and it allows me to not learn a new movement. It's using the same mechanic as the chin jab, same mechanic, only now I'm using the cane to the solar plexus. So again, you've got lots of other things. In the Defendu syllabus, it's very much about locks and controls. So, you know, some of you might be familiar with things that go over or round the arm, under the arm and behind the neck. So again, you're compressing shoulder, elbow. Some of the locks come across the body. So again, with these types of things, let's just take this basic head and arm here. I don't really like these. They're very easy for people to defend. It's hard to apply huge pressure. Will really hurt, and you can wrench the opponent. For me, doing things like this, I prefer them to be ballistic. I don't really enjoy it. I don't think they have much staying power as a held lock. But you may, as a fleeting moment of time, go crack and pull it here. But I wouldn't hold it here. I wouldn't rely on this to hold the opponent. Once that has been flexed and damage to the limbs done, I want to retract my cane and do something else. That's just a personal preference. Again, what you see Fairbairn mention or advocate, even in Defendu, his book from the 1930s, is the use of strangles or drags which you lose the neck. So I'm just going to shift Mr. Bob over here and cheekily undress him. So you get a couple in Defendu. You get one where the arm comes across the body, like so. So we get it across his trachea, and we drag our elbows back down to our hips as far as we can, squeezing our forearms into the side of the throat, making sure we apply kazushi from Fairburn's Jiu-Jitsu, take him off balance, drag him away. So you've got this version, but that's a relatively complex movement, coming round, out, grab, take it. And you see here, I'm nattering to you guys and I caught him on the jaw, and that can happen. In which case you end up in almost this cross-face position. So you can't always rely on this to strangle, it requires quite good accuracy. However, he has a simplified version, which is again is just coming over the top in a normal way, pulling and dragging here. So again, this one's a little bit simpler, but important for all of these is surprise. As soon as he sees this in his peripheral vision, he's going to drop his chin and raise his hands, which is going to make strangling and dragging him very hard to do. So it's all about the stealth and the surprise. So again, useful tools. When you move into the World War II material of Fairbairn, again, he treats this in the guides, it's more of a shorter stick, so you know, a screamer stick or even shorter, but I'll use it with the FairCane just for now because it's my new favourite toy. So in the all-in fighting style work, you've essentially got some very, very nasty material striking upwards into the throat, smashing in the Adam's apple, these types of things. So I'll take you through some of the canonical Fairbairn strikes. So again, these are in no particular order. He does have a set sequence, but again, it's about combinations. You play with it, you make it work depending on the variables. His height, your height, are you sitting, are you standing, is he to the side? You know, Fairbairn has a sequence, but each of the techniques in the sequence can be reordered to suit your scenarios. You know, context defines content. Whatever context you find yourself in, you need to be able to apply and do it so readily. But he advises having the stick stealthily held to the side, and it is actually quite hard to see a stick when it's held just behind or just aligned to the leg, especially when you're milling around with other groups of men. You see it with prisoners and knives, having against the leg, turning the body a little bit. You know, these are cues, but they're easily missed by people. But having the cane across the leg. In this instance, what we're going to do is raise it in preparedness, but without being threatening. So we just raise it. Imagine this was an officer's swagger stick or walking stick. You know, we're raising it, but we're not being threatening with it yet. We're still trying to be subtle. We're keeping the action down low. First strike of these, coming across the body. So striking using the hard tip across the body. So again, jamming in to the liver or the spleen, depending on which hand you've got, but coming into the side, into an organ that really feels the hurt, using your hips to crash it across. So from here, whoosh, 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 whoosh. So again, take it from passive to active, passive to active, driving this across the body, like so. So passive to active, and that should hit him in the stomach, and his somatic reflexes should dip his chin a little bit forward. In which case now we're driving it up under the jaw, or some people find this ends up in the throat. Either way, straight up, bang, like so. Driving up. And for me, it's important to drive the body with it. So not just the arms, the body follows. Because you really want to put this fella out. Okay. Now imagine if that hadn't done the business and hadn't taken him out. Another blow that you see, imagine him in this higher position, is striking it diagonally across, like so. So again, you were using the tip of the weapon to crack across the temple, the jaw. A hard, bony object is best from here. So imagine we've missed on the first one, we strike him down this way. Boom. If that doesn't do the trick, then we follow it up with almost like a bayonet-style butt strike. So bang, from here. Now, two schools of thought with this, depending on the shape and nature of the stick. This is a very tapered stick, so this is a relatively weak striking tool. So what I may decide to do is actually punch with this. So swing in the punch. If the stick was a bit more robust, let's say like this, a screamer stick, you might decide to use the stick. So whether you're using the stick or the fist, you're still performing the same biomechanical motion of and again, you're turning this with the same integrity as you would a hook or a palm hook or a power slap. You're still using the hip, the shoulders, the feet, all turning with this particular shot. And finally, if none of these do the trick, jamming this straight up, like so. Depending on how you are holding the cane, you might have it this way, this way, this way, this way. Doesn't really matter, but jamming this right up into the throat. From here, driving it up. Now, depending on how close you are, sometimes it can be vertical, sometimes it can be a little bit diagonal. So it can come straight up or kind of up and out towards the opponent. So up or up and out, but the important thing, whoosh, goes straight into the throat. So you've got those kind of canonical all-in fighting uses of the stick. The stealthy hide, you arm it, strike across the body, strike under the chin, strike down the head, butt stroke to the face, and finally smashing it into the throat. So these are some of the ways in which you can use it. Bear in mind there are other uses too. So again, with a cane like this, you can operate bayonet style drills. You won't have failed to notice that you've got a rather wicked point on this. So this is a weapon, a good striking weapon. This is a good striking weapon. So if held this way, imagine you carry the cane like this, the opponent gets very close, we immediately get him on guard by having the nasty, scary bit orientated towards his eyes. So he's on guard, he's on threat, and I've got this in a bayonet style fashion. Some people like to withdraw here. Often conflict happens up close. If I withdraw the tool, I've got myself a little bit extra room to drive it in. If I've got the space, I can maintain it on the hip. If you don't have the space, you may potentially wish to draw it back. But either way, you're keeping the opponent on guard by having the point here. And again, predominantly thrust orientated with this element. So you can thrust by jabbing it. So you can jab into the eyes, into the throat, into the sternum. So you can jab with it, you can lunge, and by lunge I mean essentially activate the legs more. So a jab may be, a lunge may be, you see? So I'm lunging the legs forward, I'm taking more space. Sometimes jabbing is appropriate, especially at speed. Sometimes if you want finality, the lunge is important. Making sure you activate that rear arm. You know, in an ideal world, we'd get to a lunge where we're fully out, as if we'd fully bayoneted him. Often that weapon won't allow it, but it gives us the impetus to really drive something nasty into his throat or his eyes. If we end up a bit too close, we may wish to raise like so and drive down. So the exact same techniques here, but spearing down onto the eyes, into the throat like so. And again, these can be in jab format or lunge format. And then finally, if you wanted longer range, more robust hitting with this, if you're familiar with turn of the century martial arts, you think of things like Pierre Vigny, you could use this in a Vigny can style fashion, but again, it's not optimized for it, not like a more traditional cane would be, a kind of ball-headed Malacca cane. But for two-handed striking, using the apex of this weapon, the mace-like head, absolutely doable. So again, we may have bayoneted into the throat, return is still coming, that axe-like motion I mentioned to the legs earlier on, comes down onto the collarbone, jaw, temple, crown of the head. So either way, from here, from here, from here, can crack him in the hip, crack him in the shoulder, collarbone, jaw. But that leverage motion for me allows me to keep him on point every time. I can slam him somewhere with ultimate power using the apex of the weapon, and immediately keep him on guard with the point. And if he rushes in, I can take the point into him. If he doesn't rush in, he remains in perfect range for another technique with this. Range, space, time, they all equal choice. At this range, I now have the choice, the freedom of choice, to be very deadly or relatively nice. So deadly or nice requires me to have choice. If we're this close, it may just have to be very, very messy indeed. So these are some of the options you've got to play with. the Defendu orientated stick grapples, you know, and the softer striking options to the leg or thrusting into the torso, all the way through to the all-in fighting cannon, you know, across, up, down, butt stroke, into the throat, into some more bayonet orientated, baton orientated, working with the stick. But this is a fantastic tool, I really enjoy it. I'd recommend people play with these versions, which are longer, but also kind of more accurate, shorter FairCane styles. It's a really beautiful tool. It's a perfect addition to the stuff I'm working on with Fairbairn. It's a really exciting weapon, so if you want one, hit up Allen Karlsson or drop me a message, or make your own. There's lots of guides on making your own, but have a play. They're really fun tools. A lot of people get so excited with the unarmed elements of Fairbairn or World War II combatives, or just the use of the core fighting knives, using some of the weirder stuff, like the smatchets, like the canes. They're great fun. They have great tangible benefit for other weapons, incidental or weapons of design. Either way, they have many, many benefits. So go out there and give it a play.